I was diagnosed with chronic long-term Lyme disease. It ended up affecting me neurologically. By using the words to create the art, I was starting to create new pathways through my brain by doing the text-to-image art, which has helped me with my word recall.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Reanimated Stories. I am Roger Jorns of Reanimation Design, and today I have with me Rachel. And Rachel does a super awesome service that, yes, has to do with AI, but maybe not in the way that you think about it. Or maybe it does. We're going to find out today. Rachel, how are you doing today?
I'm so happy to be here.
Awesome. And I'm extremely humbled and grateful that you're here. Rachel and I have known each other for about a year, but really we kind of talked because we've been a part of a networking group called Success Champions Network. And we met at the summit and we've had a conversation, we chatted, and we just were like, hey, I've seen what you've done the year before. And it was funny because we sat next to each other, chatted, followed each other throughout the year. And then we chatted again at the summit, and to see, where you were and what you're doing and how that's continued to grow has been really exciting. So people are probably like, well, Roger, what does she do? Rachel, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do?
So I have a company. We're called EAS, EAAS AI. I mostly work with nonprofits and small businesses. We go in and identify use cases for AI across their organization. I like to implement one small project or a pilot project, and we implement that. And we really like to look at the culture and who's using it and who's not, and ROI. And I focus a lot on training because that's really missing so much across organizations. I was diagnosed with chronic long-term Lyme disease. It ended up affecting me neurologically. Word recall is very, very difficult. By using the words to create the art, I was starting to create new pathways through my brain by doing the text to image art, which is so fascinating, which has helped me with my word recall. And then from that training and that first pilot project, we work on implementing AI across the organization.
That's super awesome. You said a couple of different things there. And the one thing I want to stick on for just a second is how you said that a lot of times companies are trying to bring in AI, but then you hit on that key mark. They're bringing it in and it's sort of like, all right, here you go, without actually explaining or training them on how to do it. And they're kind of like, okay, so what do I do? Talk a little bit about how you come in. Where do you kind of bridge that gap? And where do you usually see like the shortcomings?
I mean, this might be a hot topic, but the shortcomings really start with leadership. AI is artificial intelligence, but it's very human. It's created by humans. It's used by humans, right? One of the things we do is look at it from the human aspect. A lot of times leaders might not even necessarily be transparent on the way they're using AI. So one of the things that we talk about is the transparency. If leaders are already using it, sharing those use cases with their staff, I think is really important. Like, I used AI to draft such and such today, and it only took me 15 minutes instead of taking me 2 hours. And then making it very open for their staff to use it, or their staff to think, oh my gosh, I could use it for this or that. So I think part of that shortcoming really comes with leadership and transparency. That's been my experience so far.
That is so funny that you mentioned. I'm going to do a quick plug. So in my last podcast with Mindy, we were talking about this, and if you're listening, you'll have to go check it out. But her main thing was, just like yours, a hot topic is leadership. Yes. And I think that is so important. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I think that's such a great idea. Hey, I just used AI for this. What are your thoughts on that? Or look at how much time I saved on that. It's bringing them in. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. How do you come in with what you do? How do you bridge that gap and help them to think about it more holistically?
So you go into an organization, for example, a mid-sized nonprofit, and they have this idea. They want to be leaders in AI. They want to be seen as very technology forward, or whatever that looks like for them. So they have all of these grand ideas for what they want AI to do for them. My job is to pull them back and say, let's focus on some small wins first. And then those small wins, that's when we can really start to win big. So kind of alleviating the pressure of having to do all these things at once. And I think a lot of people quote it. There was an MIT study, and it had this huge percentage that said, of AI pilots that don't work, or most AI rollouts don't work. I think a lot of that is because people are too ambitious to start off with. So that's one thing that we do is we pull back small. I think looking at it like super huge or wanting to do a lot with AI at one time is the easiest and the fastest way to fail. What we do is we kind of, I call it like an activation, integration, and then like to mobilize. So the first thing we want to do is just activate one small pilot. If they have a larger organization, that might look like a pilot with just their leadership team of 4 or 5 people and picking that one use case, something that everybody hates to do that takes a lot of time, but their creativity is still in there, and then having the leadership really help to work on that culture. So, in the organizations that I've worked with, you have still some people who don't like AI. And I had one gal, I was doing like a presentation in front of the whole organization. I wanted to get an idea of where everybody was with AI. And I said, who all's using AI? People raised their hand. And I'm like, there are a couple hands not raised. I'm like, well, are you using it? No, I'm not using it at all. Well, why? Because I know how to think and I don't want AI to think for me. I don't need it to think for me. So we still have people that are within that belief. So one of the things within that small pilot or leadership or these teams sharing those small wins is showing people that AI doesn't necessarily think for us. We need to learn how to think differently to use it. It's just like a mini playbook, humans reviewing it, humans sharing what they're doing, and then just like a trial by repetition, like what's working, what's not working.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny because it's like common, like, well, this new thing is out. All right, let's just abandon everything and just, we're going to
Yes.
change everything and use AI, right? And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, that didn't work. In fact, I think at the time of this recording now, I think it was a few months ago that Microsoft had laid off a whole bunch of employees or something and replaced them with AI. But it was like a few days ago, I was reading a report saying that Microsoft lost revenue and certain things were wrong in the business because they had let more people go. And it was like, well, instead of doing that, you should have done it like slowly or something. I think it was Microsoft. It was some company like that. But I love that thinking where you're talking about it doesn't replace your thinking. You have to adapt to that thinking. If someone is thinking about bringing in AI to their business, no matter what size they are, what are some things that they should think about in order to start that process, whether they're small, large? What would you suggest? What should be the starting points? What should be the things that they're thinking about?
I mean, I think the first thing they need to think about is really to brainstorm those tasks that AI could help them do or take over for them. Now, that being said, always human first, always human in the loop. So I'm not saying that as like AI takes over and we never look at that. It's just, again, identifying those tasks and then picking the one that you really feel like you're going to have the greatest return on in terms of time or output. And then from there, we do a lot of custom builds, so agents or GPTs, and what can we build to help with that task. So I think the first thing they need to do is identify that one task. And then I like for the people that I work with to really use that GPT for like a month. I send out weekly questionnaires. What does this look like? And AI is not perfect. So what's not good about this? Where can it improve? And then a lot of times where this has not happened to me yet, but I'm sure that it will. I've read about it, but there are a lot of times where that custom build is just not working. Being ready to say, okay, this was a failure, not that we failed, but let's try something new. And so I think really being willing to be open and inviting your team to be part of that process is so important. I think team members, employees, staff members really need to be empowered to be part of the process and the decision making. And they're the ones that are using it.
Yeah, I think that's important to think holistically, right? Thinking how, okay, this is the task that I'm using it for. What are other people starting to use it for? And starting to like, oh, hey, that's a great idea. I do that every day, right? And that is a great task. Rachel,
Yeah.
when we had first met, I was like, oh, okay, cool. You do the AI imagery and all that. And obviously you have your cats and all that. Tell us a little bit about that. Tell us a little bit about how you got started down this path and what brought you to doing this and specifically to also helping nonprofits.
I have a furniture reupholstery business also, and I do it all out of my house. I call it a very big hobby. And so at the time, however many years ago, I thought maybe I would let go of that business. I have an art degree. I have a master's degree in art education. I love art. I'm creative. all those things. And so I was telling my husband, I need a new hobby, but I want something small. This furniture is taking over my house. I want something small. I don't want to have to spend a lot of money on paint, clay, or metal or anything. And then, like God or the universe answers. A friend of mine was posting these incredible images on Facebook. I'm like, Patrick, what are you doing? And he had gotten in on like Midjourney's like pre-beta. And so if you don't know, Midjourney is an AI text to image creation platform. And I was so lucky because he got me invited and I got in on that. This was early spring 2022. Like it was quite a while ago. And then there was like Night Cafe. I was on there. There were some other ones. I started creating AI assisted art. And I was on Discord. There was an artist who was talking about AI. And one of the tips he gave is he said, pick one subject that's just really innocuous and do absolutely everything you can with that. So it's like you're not worried about the content. It's just what you're using the text to create. And yes, I'm obsessed with cats. So I picked cats. And oh my gosh, I've got 5 figures of cat images from early 2022. But what was so fascinating to me was how I could put words together to create these images that I wanted or the style that I wanted. If you look at a lot of AI and you have a figure in there, it might just be one figure. And so that's kind of what it defaults to. But then it was like, oh my gosh, I just need to switch these words around and I can get 2 cats or 5 cats. And, it doesn't have to be cats, but putting the words together really fascinated me. At that time, I was working in a small nonprofit as the development director. I also did bookkeeping, accounting, help with the audit. I managed a small marketing team. I did events, the fundraising, annual appeal, all of those things. And I was just so overwhelmed. And then I started using it for our quarterly newsletter. And then I had, our marketing gal, she started using it for social media. Now, at this time, it was not advanced at all. We couldn't upload documents. It was very wordy. It was just kind of the beginning of it, but kind of based off of a lot of the stuff I had learned by creating those images, I was able to utilize those learnings in the text to text generation.
Yeah, that's actually really cool. So you had mentioned earlier that you have an art degree. Do you have any sort of technical background as well? Or was it that you had gotten into that pre-beta, I think you said Midjourney, and just kind of your artistic and trying to really kind of hone in and figure that out, that you just kind of were able to figure that out? Do you have a tech degree or anything?
I don't have a tech degree at all. To use AI, you don't really need one. But I will say my AI mentor, Jeff Hunter, he always talks about like, you need to know just enough. So I have done some Python learnings, and there are some learnings behind. I am not a coder, but we do need to know a little bit about how some of those things work, especially if you're using code or HTML. There's a little bit that we do need to know, or if we're creating an automation, what does that look like on the back end?
Yeah.
But no, I don't have a tech degree.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And I think that because of that you have an art degree, in some ways it frees you up, or it gives you a different perspective, right? Because, and again, not saying like, okay, well, people with a tech degree don't know how to write or anything like that, but because you know how, probably, even though it may be visually, it also makes you think verbally, right? As you're writing things down, how do I want to see this visually in a non-technical way? You're trying to express something. I'm not saying that coders and techies don't know how to express themselves verbally or anything, but just in a different way, right? And so you're doing that in a really different way. And I think that's fantastic. And that's cool. I didn't know that you had also learned some Python. I'd started to, and then I was like, I'll stick with CSS and HTML and some kind of script.
Something also that's really interesting is that in early 2016, I had gotten very sick. I was diagnosed with chronic long-term Lyme disease. It ended up affecting me neurologically, and I still have a little bit of that. But one of the ways that manifested itself is that word recall is very difficult. It's not as difficult. But one of the things I learned, because I was writing a chapter in the book and I was doing some studies, is that we've got different neurotransmitters in our brain. And by using the words to create the art, because that's that kind of creative left side of the brain instead of the right side, I was starting to create new pathways through my brain by doing the text to image art, which is so fascinating, which has
Yeah.
helped me with my word recall. And I had no idea while I was doing it that I was helping to do some repair on my brain. That's also really cool as well.
That is awesome. Yeah, that is really cool. Wow. That's really cool that you're trying to get some word recall and then you're creating new neural pathways. That's really awesome. So, Rachel, you've written some chapters in a few books, but you've also written a book. Is that correct? Tell us a little bit about that.
No, I have not written my own book. I've just written
Okay.
chapters and books. I
Okay.
do
That's
want
what
to
I
write
thought.
my own book. But yeah, so
Yeah.
I've just done chapters and books, and they, for some reason, have been around mental health. I don't know what that says about me. That last one that I was invited to be in, because last year I did 3 book chapters, and I said, I'm not writing anything else unless it has to do with AI. So that's how that last book chapter was about how AI helped me to overcome some of that Lyme disease neurological damage.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's absolutely fantastic. I think that that's really cool. Rachel, if somebody is thinking, okay, you know what? I've heard about AI, right? I don't want to, one, be like the companies that are just abandoning everything and just going all in AI and then spending all this money and then it didn't work and I have to hire a whole bunch of people back or I have to try to figure this thing out. Or they're like, well, I just really don't know where to start. Or do I even need AI in my business or in my nonprofit? What are some things that they should think about? And what are some ways that they can think about in order to say, okay, maybe I need to reach out to Rachel or someone like Rachel to kind of get that process started? What are the questions that they need to ask and think through?
I think they need to look at their staff and how overwhelmed they are. I can speak for myself at my last nonprofit that I was putting in ungodly hours. When AI came out, it was really, what do we want for our teams? We want for them to love to be at work, to not be overwhelmed, to be able to do a good job, and to be able to go home to their families or the people they love and have lives outside of work. Then they're happier at work. You really hit on a really good question is, do I even need AI? We don't need AI for everything. I think the first thing that leaders need to do is look at their staff and have that conversation in a culture of openness that your staff can tell you things that are taking them too much time or where they're overwhelmed. That is a really good place for people to start. Once that's identified, speaking to me or anyone like me, it's always sort of a free discovery call to start to identify those places. And again, and I know I've said this a few times, but it's just to start small. On a platform is not where someone should start. There are so many of the large language models that are very inexpensive that will do a lot of the things that you want it to do without having to go into like some super specialized platform that's going to cost you thousands of dollars a month. So,
Yeah.
kind of just identifying if you need it, that use case, and yes, then talking to someone like me. And then the other thing is training. Just because we can open an app like ChatGPT on a language model and we can type something into the thread doesn't mean that we know how to use it. It is a language. So I think absolutely looking at training your staff how to use it is so imperative. And another thing that organizations really need to look at is, what's our acceptable use policy? What kind of AI governance do we have? How do we determine what platforms to get? Who's going to be in charge and oversee all of this once we decide to make this change? That's something that a lot of organizations don't look at. They just charge ahead when, again, we need to pull back. There are all of these posts like all over LinkedIn or Facebook. It's like, you're so far behind. You're missing the revolution. You're not. Slow down. AI is changing every single day. So if you get in on it tomorrow, you're just getting in on the newest version. You're not missing out. Do you need to learn and start to use it? Absolutely. But you're not behind, so you don't have to rush. You want to do it properly and take those steps before and while implementing.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think it was Samsung or one of those companies that like there when ChatGPT was first came out, their employees were like putting all this stuff in and they were I think it was Samsung and they were like, time out, wait a second, you're putting proprietary information into this
Yeah.
large language model. But also to that second point, I used to sell TVs at Best Buy and Samsung speaking of Samsung again, Samsung is always like the first one to do something. Apple won't do the thing first, like the whole face thing. Android's like, oh, we've had that for years, right? But somehow Apple like really kind of refine that. Same thing with Sony TVs, right? Like they'll usually wait a year or two behind what Samsung and LG do, but they'll like refine it really well. And I think that that whole long thing comes around to basically we think we're so behind, but it's like, well, let's take a moment and really evaluate, do we really need it? Let's research it a little bit, and then let's come up with a refined somewhat product, right? Or let's make sure that we really need it and thought through it instead of just like gung ho, and just throw everything at it. So yeah, that's really awesome. I really appreciate that. Rachel, if someone was looking to connect with you, looking to reach out, where can they find you?
So LinkedIn is the best place to find me. It's Rachel, Rachael Garnett, Garnett. And then also I teach something called the AI persona method, which is like an 8-step method for creating these different AI employees. I have the top 10 AI personas that every business needs. And it's also very cute. It has some cats, but it's lp.eaaservice.com.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all of Rachel's info and links in the description so you can check out her personas. You can connect with her on LinkedIn, maybe have a virtual chat, pick her brain, and also hear about some cool stuff that she does with upholstery and her cats.
Yeah.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming out today, or rather meeting me halfway by jumping on a call here. I'm really grateful that you joined me, and I will talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you later, Rachel.